5 weeks ago, the Falcons were 6-3 and first in the NFC South. And over those last 5 weeks, the Falcons have dropped 4 games, dipping under 500 for the first time this season. They are on the road again this week, hoping to right the ship in Las Vegas against the Raiders on Monday Night Football. Thank you guys for joining us for the Falcons pregame show presented by Ticketmaster. Taylor Vismor, Derek Rackley, so glad to have you. We're going to be with you guys for the next 30 minutes. And Rack, this one feels, and the next 4 games really feel really, really important for the Falcons.
It's like I got a little bit of that anxious energy going on, and like, what do I have written right there? Can you read my
Every
hand?
game now equals must win.
Every game now equals must win, especially the way that the Buccaneers are playing. We're going to talk about them here in a second, but it's just now it's like you get into December always, no matter whether, obviously, if you still have a chance to get into the postseason, but everything gets a little bit more important. It gets a little bit more tense, but it's who can operate the best under those conditions. Because every team's, you could be the Detroit Lions and you're feeling the same type of tenseness, if you will, but it's how do you perform under that pressure, as they call it. That's what National Football League is all about. It carries on into the playoffs. Everything starts to ramp up more. Who performs the best, who executes the best when it really gets down to crunch time, it separates kind of the men from the boys, if you will.
Right. Well, and in December, too, some teams are starting to clinch the playoffs right now. I know the Steelers clinched last night, and so a couple other teams have clinched already. So you're starting to feel, if you're not quite in the playoffs yet, that, oh, we have to get in now. And all these games really matter, and the Falcons kind of need to win out for the rest of the season. And, of course, it starts tonight against the Las Vegas Raiders. But let's kind of go back to last week against the Vikings, because it was Kirk Cousins. He was returning to Minnesota for the first time after signing here with the Falcons. What did you see, not just from Kirk Cousins, but the team as a whole from that Vikings loss? Yeah,
I mean, let's start with Kirk Cousins. I mean, you can look at the performance and you can say, well, there was things that were better, but then you look at the 0 touchdowns and 2 interceptions and you say, well, it kind of looks like it's been the previous 3 weeks, right? And it's, at the end of the day, if you don't win a football game, especially under those circumstances, right, where Kirk was going back to one of his former teams, all the emotions that he was going to have to deal with as far as that goes, and then playing inside of that stadium, which is one of the loudest in the National Football League, and then coming off before the Vikings game, the previous 3 games where he did not play up to Kirk Cousins' level, and then all of a sudden you finish the game and you lose and you have no touchdown passes, 2 interceptions, and even though you throw for 344 yards, everybody wants to look at the 2. That's all they want to look at is the 2 in the interception column and the 0 in the touchdown column. Unfortunately, that's the nature of the beast in the National Football League, especially when you get paid a lot of money. Sometimes, Taylor, if you're a younger quarterback or you're not supposed to be the starter or you haven't proven yourself yet, they'll give you a little bit of a pass.
Right.
They'll say, well, he's got to have more time. He needs to get more experience, this, that, or the other, but that's not really afforded to a guy like Kirk Cousins.
Right.
His job is to come in, especially after how things went in September, October. He's supposed to help this team win, to turn around the misfortunes of previous seasons. And unfortunately, him and the team is falling short of that right now.
Right, and I think when you look at Kirk Cousins last week, you kind of, that first half really, not just Kirk Cousins, but the offense as a whole, it was really well called, really sound first half for this Falcons. Great start for this Falcons offense, and then it just kind of all crumbled. And like you said, you mentioned, when you have a younger guy under center, when you have your younger guy leading an offense, you get a little bit more wiggle room. You get a little bit more of, okay, it's fine. We're going to, take it as it is and move forward. And that was a huge question, speaking of younger quarterbacks, leaving last week, was Michael Penix and Kirk Cousins, and who's going to start, and should they bench Kirk Cousins or should they start Michael Penix? And Raheem Morris was asked that this week in his press conferences, and he kind of let everyone know that Kirk Cousins is the starter.
You lead an organization, and you got to have trust and belief in the people that got you to where you were, right? Kirk came here and he got us to a point that we are in a playoff contention, and you got to believe and you got to have the resolve to be able to stick and stay steady-handed by the guy that you believe in. And I don't want to be like some organizations who make harsh decisions or critical decisions on your critical decision makers when they fail you or they make their mistakes, right? I just feel like it's our job and my job to back him at the highest level of certainty to get him to get out there and play better. And this has nothing to do with a non-belief of our backup or anything like that, but he is a rookie, and we do have a plan, and we have had a plan from the beginning.
Raheem Morris said, when you lead an organization, you've got to have trust and belief in the people that got you where you were. You got to believe, you got to have the resolve to be able to stick and stay steady-handed by the guy that you believe in. So Rackley, I mean, he said it, right? He's sticking with Kirk Cousins. When you have this media that's having kind of a field day with this conversation, what do you take from what Raheem Morris said to media this week?
Yeah, to me, this situation is one of those where I would say external to the organization. Outside of this building, the building that we are seated in right now, there's probably a lot of conversation about the backup quarterback. That's the nature of the beast in the NFL. The backup is always the best player on a struggling football team, but even more so when the backup quarterback is a first-round draft pick of the most recent draft. But internal, inside the organization, you can listen to what Raheem Morris just said, and there is no wavering going on right now. He made it very clear what he and this organization believe right now is what the best situation for the Atlanta Falcons offense is, and it's Kirk Cousins. And they said they have a plan for Michael Penix. So you can sit there and disagree, and you can say, well, he's wrong, and he needs to make the change because this guy needs to be the starting quarterback. Guess what? It doesn't matter what you think. It only matters what Raheem Morris, his coaching staff, and the personnel department think. And right now, they believe that Kirk is the guy that's going to get them where they want to go. Now, things can change. Things can be fluid. It's always fluid in the National Football League. But what he said this week is support for his starting quarterback. And I think you probably win some cool points, if you will, with the rest of your team to say, you know what? He's not going to turn his back on us at the first sight of adversity. He's not going to just say, okay, well, you're not getting the job done. Let's go to the next guy. You're not. And sometimes that does happen in the National Football League. But right now, he's supporting his veteran quarterback.
Yeah, Kirk Cousins also said after the game on Sunday, listen, that Chargers game, that was a low bar for me to kind of exceed that expectation going to the Vikings game. And like you said, he had over 300 passing yards, 2 interceptions. Yes, still didn't have a touchdown. But in my opinion, like I said earlier, great first half from this Falcons offense. But it's the second half, really the fourth quarter, where the top kind of came off. And it wasn't even the Falcons offense. It was really this Falcons defense. You saw a lot of struggle from this Falcons secondary throughout the third quarter and all of the fourth quarter. So, and it's not just this Vikings game either. It's kind of been a progression for the secondary in particular. So what have you been seeing as of late from this Falcons secondary?
Yeah, there was some miscommunication last week, and here's the thing. It's not that I can sit here and say, well, this is a unit that's been struggling the entire season. I'm not going to go that far as to say that. But what I would say has been happening to Atlanta, and that's why they call this a 3-phase football game, right? Because all 3 phases have to be hitting on all cylinders to be successful. And sometimes you can get away with 2 of them are good and 1 of them is bad because you've got a couple of really good players that are good enough to overcompensate for some of the other mistakes. But just think about this 4-game losing streak, if you will. You've had struggles by the offense. You've had struggles by your quarterback and interceptions. You've had struggles on special teams with missed field goals and fumbles on kickoff return. And then you've had struggles on defense, especially in the secondary, giving up way too many explosive plays. So just think about that. I kind of summarized the last 4 games, the last 4 losses for the Atlanta Falcons, and it has been something different every single game. That's why it's a team football game. That's why it's a 3-phase football game. And just when you think, well, maybe our offense played well enough, you could argue that they did not play well enough last week against Minnesota, but the defense didn't play well enough, especially in the second half, most notably in the fourth quarter.
Yes.
Giving up 21 points in the fourth quarter and giving up just way too many explosive plays in the game. I mean, I look back 25, 26, 49, and 52 at least are explosive plays given up in that Minnesota game. You just can't expect to win games when you turn it over and give up that many explosive plays.
This Falcons secondary is last in the NFL with receptions allowed. They've allowed more receptions from any opposing team than anyone else in the NFL. They're tied for last place with the Texans in passing touchdowns allowed, which is 26 on the year. How do they put together a complete game today?
Yeah, I mean, that's the best summary right there, is putting together a complete game. And that's what Atlanta needs desperately. And it's getting off the field on third down on defense. It's minimizing explosive plays. And I'm not even going to say eliminate, because sometimes that's just unrealistic to say eliminate. But if you can keep it to a minimum, give up maybe 2 explosive plays in the game, but then come away with some turnovers. Like, that's a good performance right there. Get off the field on third down, don't give up explosive plays, and find some takeaways, right? Have not been able to do that over the 4-game losing streak. And then you think about an offense. We got to secure the football. We'll get to that more a little bit later. Run the football. Win the line of scrimmage, which is running game and pass protection for Kirk Cousins. And then you got to play a sound game on special teams, which means no turnovers, and make all the field goals and the points that you can make. That's putting together a complete game. And yet you could say that for everybody. That's their goal going into it. But for whatever reason, every single week, it's been some area, some phase, if not two phases, that's just fallen a little bit short for Atlanta. And they are desperate to put together that complete game.
Yeah, looking for a complete game tonight. So let's go ahead and talk about this Las Vegas Raiders team. They're 2-11 on a 9-game losing streak right now. They're on the losing streak just like the Falcons are, hoping to right the ship tonight. But they're out 2 enormous players for this team on both sides of the ball. Aiden O'Connell will be inactive tonight. That means Desmond Ridder will get the start under center. And then Max Crosby on the defense. He will be out tonight and inactive with an ankle injury. He played through the ankle injury last week against the Buccaneers, but he will not be active today. These are 2 huge inactives. Let's start with Aiden O'Connell and the starting roster for Desmond Ridder.
Yeah, so you could probably make an argument for Aiden O'Connell or all 3 of the quarterbacks that essentially seen time for the Las Vegas Raiders this year, that not really any of them have been marquee guys that you're really all that concerned about. But you always think that the starter, the guy that's gotten the most reps, is going to have the best chance to be able to pose a problem for you. So Aiden O'Connell, he ends up getting hurt. He's going to end up being the 3rd quarterback. I believe they were going to test him out before the game, but Desmond Ridder was going to be the likely starter, which oddly enough, is got some home cooking to it, right? Desmond Ridder, the former draft pick of the Atlanta Falcons just a couple short years ago, back in 2022. Things didn't quite work out for him over his last couple of years, got a couple of opportunities. But as we've seen over the course of, I would say, the last couple of years, if not just this year. I mean, think about Baker Mayfield, what he's doing in Tampa. Think about Sam Darnold. Atlanta just got a chance to see him. Sometimes you need a change of scenery. So Desmond Ridder, as we mentioned, 3rd-round pick of the Falcons, ends up getting traded to the Cardinals back in March, and then he's on the Cardinals practice squad, ends up getting signed by Las Vegas because of the injuries at the quarterback position, and then all of a sudden, he's getting thrust into the starting role against the team that drafted him.
Well, and what's crazy for Desmond Ridder tonight is that he won't really be able to lean on the rush as much as he might have been able to against Atlanta. This Raiders offense, is in the last place in rushing average. They average 79 yards per game in the league. That's the lowest, like I just said, in the National Football League. And then they're 16th in passing, averaging 223 yards per game. So looking at what we know about Desmond Ridder, what he was here in Atlanta, and then obviously what he's doing with Las Vegas, what do you expect to see from him? And how do you think the secondary maybe gets back on track and maybe picking off Desmond Ridder tonight?
Yeah, so you kind of think about this a little bit. If they're the last rushing offense in the National Football League at 79.1 yards per game, it's not very good. It's not even really close. I think the next one is like 9 yards better than them as far as yards per game. So you're thinking, okay, then maybe you got a really good chance of slowing down the run game with 6 or 7, right? So then you're not bringing down Jesse Bates, Justin Simmons into the box to be able to guard against the run game. Those guys can stay back, and what can they do? They can start playing center field. They can start looking for areas to be opportunistic, to anticipate, and find some things that maybe some of these players that were on the defense the last couple of years got a chance to see Desmond Ridder, and maybe they know a couple of his little nuances on where he likes to shove the football. He likes to try to throw this pass in this window, so if I can bait him into that throw, maybe that's where we can get one of the takeaways. But still, just because you play this stats game, right, that they're not a very good rushing team and you take it for granted, that's when all of a sudden they end up with 125 rushing yards and they never should have. So it always comes back to stop the run first. Stop the run first. That gives you the right to rush the passer. That gives you the right to go after the football when it's in the air and get takeaways.
You bring up rushing the passer. This Raiders offense has allowed 43 sacks this season. That's the 28th in the league, so 4th worst in the league, if I'm doing my math correctly. 43 sacks on the season. That's throughout 3 different quarterbacks, like you've mentioned before, with Gardner Minshew, Aiden O'Connell, and of course Desmond Ridder. So we've seen this Falcons pass rush kind of come together, come to life the last couple of weeks. What do you expect to see from them today going against someone like Desmond Ridder?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're the defensive front, if you're the linebackers, you're thinking we've got an opportunity because they're probably turned on the tape throughout the week and saw a lot of different games, a lot of different schemes where people were getting pressure, not just against Desmond Ridder, who has been sacked 7 times in his playing time so far this year, but as well the other quarterbacks. Because when Atlanta or any team is facing off against an opponent, they don't just watch the game from last week. They watch cut-up reels that dissects basically the entire season. And what they do is they put together reels where, okay, if we're on defense, we're in a 4-man front and we're going to pressure, we're playing nickel, right? We're going to see all the plays where the Las Vegas Raiders have seen a similar look to that throughout the course of the season. And they might watch a play and say, sack. Might watch a play and say sack. Might watch a play and say running back doesn't protect very well here. Might watch a play and say tight end doesn't chip when he comes off the line of scrimmage, so I've got an opportunity to come around the corner. These are all those little things when you see or hear about the players on their iPads, which, by the way, I never had because iPads weren't really a thing in the early 2000s, at least to watch tape anyway.
You were just like doing the X's and O's
exactly.
by hand.
It's on paper, spiral notebooks.
Gotcha,
okay?
gotcha.
You remember those days? Probably not, Taylor. But this is where your scouting, your game planning, your research comes into play, and you find opportunities to create an advantage for your team. And like I said, get sacks, get tackles for loss, or take the ball away in the secondary.
You brought up the tight end, so let's talk about a tight end with Las Vegas Raiders. He's possibly going to be the offensive rookie of the year. What do you know about Brock Bowers?
I know this boy good. I'll say that.
That's right.
If there's one thing that has been really good for the Las Vegas Raiders this year, it's been Brock Bowers. Anybody that followed him in the college game, whether you followed the Southeastern Conference, you're a fan of the Georgia Bulldogs, or if you just watch college football, you knew that this guy was likely going to be special in the National Football League, and that's exactly what he's doing. Now, it's not showing up in the win-loss column because this just shows that one guy, especially at the tight end position, nothing against him, is not going to be able to change the complete fortunes of an entire organization. But if you're the Las Vegas Raiders, you're like, well, we might need to make a lot of changes next year, but this is not one area we got to make any changes.
Right.
We're going to try to build our team, our offense around this young man. 118 targets, 87 receptions. Think if you're Sam Laporta, by the way, right? Detroit Lions. You're like last year, set the record, the NFL record of most catches in a season by a rookie tight end. Guess what? You held it for about 8 months. Right?
Imagine.
Like, at least just let the man hold it for maybe 8 years. Sam Laporta said, yeah, I really enjoyed my name at the top of the record books. I took 2 cups of coffee, and there's already somebody else that takes over my record. But I think a lot of people knew this is the capability that Brock Bowers had. And you saw with the targets, no matter what quarterback it is, they're looking for him because he's the most effective playmaker that they have on offense.
Yeah, and it's always so interesting to watch these first-round rookies kind of come into the league because sometimes they have a slower start and they have to find their footing and they have that welcome to the NFL moment. And it felt like Brock Bowers never really did. He came on to the Raiders and he fits their system. Obviously, like you have mentioned, does not show up in the win-loss column, but he's been on a tear recently, probably going to be the offensive rookie of the year. But it's not just Brock Bowers. That's the only pass catcher on this offense either. It's also Jacoby Myers and Trey Tucker. What do you know about these guys that the Falcons fans might not know?
Yeah, I mean, it's the 2 top receivers that they have, and neither of them, if you look at their names, you're not going to say, oh, like when Devontae Adams was there, it was like, oh yeah, this guy right here, if you let him, he can take over a game. These are younger players, not necessarily as established as a Devontae Adams. They've got combined 4 touchdown receptions. So we've talked about the struggles of the Las Vegas Raiders. Brock Bowers, by the way, he had 4 touchdowns this season by himself. So they've got 2 younger guys that they feel confident that are getting better each and every week, that are getting more improved when they have more experience, but not necessarily guys that you worry about. Like, think about some of the past few weeks, the guys, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, that the Atlanta Falcons faced. They're not going to face that type of wide receiver this week, but I don't want to sit here and say, oh, well, they can take a week off because the level of competition is going to drop off. One thing you always say is, Taylor, these guys are pros for a reason. They may not be Justin Jefferson or Devontae Adams or some of the other top receivers in the NFL, but they're pros for a reason. Don't let them have a career game against you when you're thinking about only Brock Bowers or Desmond Ridder.
Right, let's talk about a pro's pro on the defense for this Raiders team. Obviously, we mentioned earlier Max Crosby. He's not going to be playing. That's the pro's pro. He's the game wrecker. He's the one that everyone circles on the sheet when they are playing the Raiders. What is it going to be like with Max Crosby not on the field?
I always wonder how this conversation goes. Like, I wonder if somebody from the personnel department or the coaching staff comes into the locker room and they just tap Kirk Cousins on the shoulder and be like, Just so you know, Max Crosby's not.
Yeah, you can calm down. You can calm down.
And then I always I was never close enough to the quarterbacks to see if this actually went down when I was playing. But I'm just wondering if Kirk was like, okay, cool. I feel much better about my game plan tonight. Because Max Crosby, when he is healthy and when he is in the lineup, he creates havoc. I mean, one of the premier pass rushers in this league, and this guy has a motor that doesn't stop, and he's probably going to try to get inside your kitchen, get it in between your ears with some of his trash talking, but that's just the type of player that he is. So when you don't have him on the field, you feel a little bit better that you don't have to worry so much about where's 98. I got to keep my eye on 98. Is he on the right? Is he on the left? Where's my pass protection? Do I have somebody to chip him on the way out? Do I have a tight end over the top of him? Do I make sure that we're not sliding the other direction and he gets man-to-man against Kyle Pitts? Because it's a mismatch. That's what happens with premier pass rushers in the National Football League. You always have to wonder who they're going up against, where's my help, and more importantly, where's my hot route? Because if he ends up in the backfield immediately, where do I get the ball out of my hands? So that's not going to be in the cards tonight for Kirk Cousins with Crosby. But again, just because he's not playing doesn't mean that somebody else behind him still can't end up having a career game. So offensive line, tight ends, running backs, make sure that nobody else ends up having a Max Crosby-esque type game tonight.
Right. I know that you don't know because you just said that, but do you ever think that Kirk Cousins is thinking oh thank God, oh thank God he's not in this game? Because we've talked about for the last couple of weeks, he's kind of been on a skid. He hasn't had any touchdowns in the last 4 games, and so is this a moment maybe because Max Crosby is not breathing down your neck the entire game, and the secondary isn't really anything jumping off paper, that this could be a moment for Kirk Cousins to get back to throwing touchdowns in the end zone?
You sure hope so. Right? I mean, I don't really think it goes down to that, that Kirk Cousins at this moment is thinking the fact that Max Crosby's not in the game. Kirk Cousins is thinking about how do I execute on 3rd and 2, and heaven forbid, how do I throw a touchdown pass again? Not that the players think about that, but that's the pressure that he's dealing with because that's what the media is talking about. Every time you come in, you sit down in a post-game press conference after a loss and you had poor stats, they want to ask you, well, what's the problem? How come you aren't throwing any touchdown passes? You ever been in this spot in your career? What are you going to do to get out of it? The questions never stop. So he's not thinking about Max Crosby. He's thinking about how do we get first downs? Right. How do we convert on 3rd down? How do we punch the ball in the end zone when we get into the red zone? Right.
Well, this Falcons team definitely needs to get a win today against the Las Vegas Raiders because the playoffs are on the line, right? And with Tampa Bay winning last night against the Chargers, they put up 40 against the Chargers. Now, if the Falcons lose, they're going to be 2 games back. So let's talk about the playoff picture a little bit before we get to the keys to the game tonight. When you look at what happened yesterday with Tampa Bay and what's at stake today for the Falcons, how important is this particular game?
I mean, it's must win because you're looking at Tampa and you're seeing, okay, Baker Mayfield, even though Atlanta got 2 against him this year, Baker Mayfield's playing at an unbelievable level. Yep. They got Mike Evans back, and Mike Evans is balling since he came back. And this team is just one of those that plays with a swagger about them. And by the way, their record, the Tampa Bay Bucks, to come out to finish out the season, the best team they're going to play is the Cowboys, who's got a 6-8 record, and the final 3 opponents they have are a 14-28 combined record. So it's a very manageable schedule for them. They're playing with a ton of confidence, which is kind of the exact opposite of Atlanta right now, and they've already got the 1-game lead depending on what happens tonight against Las Vegas. So you're looking at a Tampa team who a lot of people came into this season thinking that they were going to be the division winner. Then Atlanta kind of punches them in the mouth early on in the season, and now Atlanta's on this 4-game skid, and it's decision time. Right? Are you going to end up winning out the rest of the year and end up kind of getting that tiebreaker back with Tampa Bay, or are you going to have a much different end to this season?
Yeah, I mean, if you can get this win today, it obviously helps you in the division, but there is still a chance if the Falcons do lose today that they could still make the playoffs with that Commanders game that's coming up in Washington in a couple of weeks. That's a really, really important game. But for the Falcons, it's the Raiders, then at home with the Giants, then away again with the Commanders after Christmas break, and then, of course, the Carolina Panthers to close out the season. How important not just is this game, but the rest of the 4 weeks of the regular season?
Yeah, I mean, it's win out. I mean, and we sit here, and the former player in me doesn't ever want to talk about the rest of the season, especially when you're on a 4-game losing streak. Unfortunately, I have been there. My rookie year, I had a 5 and a 6-game losing streak in one season. And then in 2003, I had a 7-game losing streak. It absolutely stinks because all you think about is how do we get out of this rut? How do you keep a job? How do you end up executing? There's so many things that come through your mind when you get in this situation. So Taylor, like, these guys aren't even thinking about what goes on the rest of the season. They're on the West Coast. They're trying to figure out, how do we just beat the 2-11 Las Vegas Raiders? On paper, Atlanta's saying we are a better team. Guess what? They don't play the games on paper.
Exactly. So let's talk about how to get back in the win column tonight. This is the Keys to the Game presented by Wells Fargo. You got 3 for me, as you always do. What's your first one tonight?
It's going to be win in the red zone. And I'm going to keep this on offense because, well, you look at this 4-game losing streak, and it has not been good in the red zone. 4 of 13 Atlanta has been in the red zone, whereas the opponents have been 9 of 13. So just think about that. Opponents scored 5 more opportunities in the exact same amount of attempts in the red zone over this 4-game losing streak. Atlanta 48.8% in the red zone. That's touchdowns in the National Football League. That's 26th in the NFL entering this weekend. So once you get into the red zone, you've got to find a way to put touchdowns on the board, especially when you're playing on the road. Because you know what happens? You don't score touchdowns, you kick field goals, you give the team on the other side hope. You give them hope that, they only got 3 out of it. So they're like, we just scored a touchdown, we're right back in this. Don't give them hope, convert in the red zone. Touchdowns.
Raiders are the 25th team in red zone conversion, so obviously this is a big opportunity for the Falcons to score in the red zone tonight. What is your second key to the game?
It's going to be win the turnover margin. It's one of those deals where you keep harping on it until it changes, right? And it's been the bugaboo not only the entire season, -9 for the Atlanta Falcons in the turnover margin, and it's been the same thing in this 4-game losing streak. They have lost the turnover margin 9-1. Which means they've given it away 9 times and they've only gotten 1 takeaway. So when I say turnover margin, yeah, you might think I'm going just to Kirk Cousins, the interceptions. But the defense hasn't necessarily helped out there either, because they could have had, over this 4-game losing streak, 13 takeaways. And you're +4, right? So it's a team concept. Not only is it 2 phases, it's 3 phases, because you can get turnovers and takeaways on special teams. Ask Minnesota about that one. So they have got to, and I mean got to, win the turnover margin in this game tonight.
Yeah, the Raiders are the last in the league with turnover margin at -17. They have turned the ball over on offense 25 times, and they've only forced 8 turnovers on defense. So if there's ever a game to win in the turnover margin, it's going to be against this team tonight on Monday Night Football. What is your third and final key to the game?
Cut it loose, okay? And you might say, well, what does that mean? Guess what? No stats, no numbers, no comparisons. Sometimes when you get in a 4-game losing streak and you go out on the field, like, cut it loose. Don't think about what you got to do. Don't start processing. That stuff has to come naturally. If it doesn't just come to you in the course of the game, you're not prepared enough, right? So just go out there, play confident, cut it loose. Know that you belong in this moment. Take prime time on your shoulders and say, we're going to go show America that we are not the team that we've played like the last 4 games, and we are going to be a much better football team in this game, because we're going to cut it loose. We're going to fly around the field. We're going to make plays. We're going to score touchdowns. We're going to dance. We're going to smile. We're going to boogie. Whatever it is you want to do. Cut it loose in this one
You're
tonight.
only promised 4 more games this season, so you might as well have fun doing it. I say all the time when we need like a perspective a little bit of like, we're working for a team that plays a kids game for fun, like for a professional. And I know it's more than that for so many people and for myself. And it can get hard to kind of smell the roses a little bit, especially when you are where the Falcons are right now. But when you go back to having fun and making it what it is, which is, it's just a kids game. We're having fun. Like, go around, go cut it loose and just let it fly. I think that you're right. Sometimes it is just about letting it go, having a little bit more fun. But I have my own preference today, and it's not about having fun. It's about, I need the secondary to get back on track today. Obviously, we already talked about last week against the Vikings. They gave up 21 points in the 4th quarter. I need this secondary, the A.J. Terrells, the Jesse Bateses of the world, the Justin Simmons, Mike Hughes, D. Alford, all the nickels and all the dime packages. I need this secondary to come out, play loud, play and defend every blade of grass, which is what Jesse Bates always says. We want to defend every blade of grass. They're going against their former quarterback. Let's see if they can pick him off tonight. force some turnovers and get that turnover margin look in the right direction tonight.
Do you have a song that you can sing for sound secondary? You know, it's like sound.
No, listen, I talk for a living. I don't sing for a living. Let me just trust me when I say.
You don't want to sing just for one night?
Absolutely not. Do you?
I want you to sing for them.
No, do you want to sing?
No, don't turn this on me.
If the Falcons go to the Super Bowl this year, then I will sing the entire pregame show. How's that?
That's
for the
a
Super Bowl.
deal.
For the Super Bowl.
Okay.
I will sing the entire pregame show, okay? That's it. Anyway, we're going to let you guys go because this is getting off the rails here. Monday Night Football. Monday Night Football, it will be on ESPN starting at 8:30. We'll see you guys next week in Mercedes-Benz Stadium.